5 Sinister True Stories of a Haunted Cabin in the Wrong Forest Exposed Secrets That Terrify. Mark Caldwell could feel the weight of the world lift as he parked the family SUV in front of the rustic cabin deep in the Appalachian backwoods. The towering trees loomed around them like ancient sentinels, whispering secrets only they could understand. But there was an undercurrent of dread that prickled at the back of his neck. As he stepped out, he realized they were about to step into a tale that would make even seasoned thrill-seekers shudder. Unpacking the car, William's laughter filled the crisp air. Sarah, his overworked wife, beamed at their kids, Emily and Jake, who were busy chasing each other and frolicking among the gnarly roots. Yet, beneath this idyllic scene lurked something sinister. A bone-chilling wind swept through the cabin, sending a shiver racing down Mark's spine. He shrugged it off at first, but the unease gnawed at him. Night fell quickly, casting eerie shadows that danced outside their window. The cozy cabin became a fragile fortress against the creeping darkness. Strange noises echoed through the woods, rumbling thuds and faint whispers that teased their ears, interrupting uneasy sleep. Their hearts raced, but denial cloaked their minds. That was until items began to vanish. Family photos, Jake's beloved toy truck, both mysteriously reappearing stacked precariously in the dusty attic. An invisible force seemed to taunt them. The couple from the neighboring cabin, the Whitakers, waved with unervingly wide smiles, their friendliness felt more like a trap. They shared hiking trail tips but lingered just a bit too long, their laughter ringing hollow against the surrounding quiet. As Mark looked into their eyes, he could almost see the sinister glint hidden deep in their smiles, a flicker of something malevolent beneath the surface. Emily's fingers trembled as she pulled back the curtain to peer outside. She gasped. "Mom! Dad! Did you hear that?" Scratches echoed close to the window, but Mark shrugged it off. "Just an animal," he said. Fear pulsed like a living thing in the cabin, it wrapped tight around them like a suffocating blanket. They went to bed uneasy, yet relieved. Yet that night, a howl pierced the silence, primal and echoing, sending shivers down their spines. The next morning, Mark felt an itch to escape, to gauge what was really happening in this small town. What he discovered chilled him to the bone. A sheriff more interested in local lore than family safety, whispers circulating about the cabin's former owner, a man who had vanished after dabbling in dark folk rituals. Returning to the cabin, he shared the tales, each word stoking a fire of paranoia within. Their family bonding experience swiftly morphed into something darker, tearing at the seams of their trust. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, as shadows crept deeper into their minds, they were beckoned by the Whitakers. Dinner felt wrong, the air thick with unspoken secrets, the woods outside seeming to loom closer. With every bite, their unease coiled tighter. When a guttural howl rang through the trees again, fear erupted. The family bolted into the inky blackness of the woods, running with hearts pounding, the line between hunter and hunted blurred by the curling shadows. Jake's cries echoed around them, frantic and distant, as they split apart in terror. Mark's pulse raced as he stumbled upon an altar. Symbols scratched into the earth mirrored haunting designs he'd seen in their kitchen. Panic surged through him. How had they come to this? And as ghostly figures materialized from the shadows, the cruel smiles of the Whitakers piercing through the fog, he finally understood, the true horror was not in the woods, but in the fangs of familiarity that promised safety. What had they escaped from, and how could they find each other when the darkness itself conspired against them? The howl still echoed in Mark's ears as he darted through the underbrush, weaving between the thick trunks of the trees. Each breath came in ragged gasps, his heart pounding like a war drum. He desperately called for Jake, each cry swallowed by the suffocating darkness that engulfed him. Emily was gone. Sarah was lost somewhere in the shadows. A sudden rustle behind him made him spin around, instincts kicking in. The oppressive black felt alive, each sound magnified in the silence that surrounded him. Mark kneeled down, desperate to listen, straining for the sound of their voices, but all he could hear was the relentless thumping of his own heartbeat. A low whisper slithered through the air, teasing at his edges of sanity. "Help us!" Mark shook his head, his skin prickled with fear. "No. You're not real." His voice cracked, echoing softly in the night. The whisper persisted, rising and falling like a tide, drawing him closer to the ancient altar he had stumbled upon earlier. Was he going mad? He needed to find his family, but the voice was magnetic, luring him, as the darkness seemed to grow thicker. "Dad!" Jake's frightened cry broke through the air, cutting like glass. The sound came from the direction of the altar. Mark hesitated for only a moment, letting the boy's voice anchor him back to reality. He turned and propelled himself through the woods, branches whipping against his face, urgency pushing him forward. He reached the altar, panting heavily, his eyes darting around. And there was Jake, crouched beside the carved stones, trembling and clutching something. The dim light allowed him to see the glint of a familiar object, Jake's toy truck. "Jake!" Mark rushed toward him. "Thank God, I found you." But as he bent down, a heavy weight pressed against him. He could see Jake now, but the child's eyes were wide and vacant. "Dad, they came for Mom." "What do you mean?" Mark recoiled, panic flooding him. "Where's your mother?" The shadows around them thickened, swirling like a fog trying to swallow them whole. A figure appeared from the darkness, an outline that flickered like a flame in the wind. It was Mrs. Whitaker, her smile stretched impossibly wide, eyes glinting like black coals. "Ah, the boy and his father," she cooed, voice sweet yet laced with something darker. "Join us, won't you? She's waiting for you. Get away from my son." Mark shouted, adrenaline surging. He grabbed Jake's hand, ready to run, but the ground beneath them began to tremble. Symbols on the altar glowed faintly, pulsating with a rhythm that was almost alive. The air grew thick, heavy with dread. "You're too late," the figure whispered, her tone dripping with malice. Mark felt the very fabric of reality fraying around him. They were trapped. Panic clawed at his chest. He scanned the darkness for signs of Sarah, but all he saw was unfathomable depths. The woods seemed to be alive, breathing, and whispering secrets meant for their ears alone. "Dad, help!" Jake screamed, pulling on his arm as the shadows began to wrap around them like tendrils of smoke. Mark screamed, "Run!" and sprinted into the unknown, the whispers growing louder behind them, but as they dashed through the thickets, an unshakable feeling settled in the pit of his stomach. They weren't alone. Someone was hunting them in the darkness, and somewhere, deep in those woods, Sarah would have to decide, resist or surrender. As they stumbled through the twisted branches, Mark couldn't help but wonder what horrors lay ahead waiting for them. Would they find each other, or would the night swallow them whole? Mark sprinted through the chaos, adrenaline coursing through him like fire. The branches clawed at him, sharp and unforgiving, but he didn't stop. He had to shield Jake from whatever hunted them, whatever twisted fate loomed. "Keep close," he yelled, glancing back. The shadows writhed, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to stretch toward them with a hungry thirst. Frantic breaths filled the air as they ran deeper into the forest, where the moonlight barely penetrated the veils of thick branches. "Dad!" Jake cried, nearly tripping over a gnarled root. "Stay with me." Mark tightened his grip, pulling his son alongside him. Each step felt like they were sinking deeper into some dark abyss. He tried to keep the fear from seeping into his voice, but it slipped through like cold water. The ground beneath them trembled again, a deep, resonant rumble, as if the earth was alive and warning them to turn back. They broke through the underbrush and stumbled into a small clearing bathed in pale moonlight. For a moment, the eerie stillness offered them a false sense of safety. Mark dropped to his knees, panting heavily, and he dared to hope that they could regroup, catch their breath. "Jake, listen," Mark began, but he was interrupted by a distant, haunting wail. It echoed off the trees, filling the air with dread. Panic surged again in his chest. The shadows were closing in around them. "Where's Mom?" Jake whispered, his eyes wide, glistening under the muted light. Mark's heart sank. "We'll find her, buddy. I promise." But deep down, he felt the promise slipping through his fingers like smoke. Where could she be? A shiver raced down his spine. The trees seemed to pulse, alive with whispers that slithered into his ears. This was wrong. Everything felt wrong. "Look!" Jake gasped, pointing into the darkness beyond the clearing. Mark followed his gaze and his blood turned to ice. A flicker of movement, something flitted between the trees, inhuman and fast. "Get back!" Mark shouted, instincts kicking in as he pushed Jake behind him. But the figure halted, revealing a girl about Jake's age, standing motionless with her head tilted unnaturally to the side. Her skin was as pale as the moon, her eyes vacant and dark. "Help me," she rasped, her voice a mimicry of the earlier whispers, like nails on a chalkboard. "Jake, I don't like this, let us go." Mark tugged his son backward, but Jake took a step toward the girl, entranced. "Dad, she needs help." "No." Mark's voice rose, panic sparking in his chest. "She's not real, stay back." But the girl's lips curled into a sinister smile, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too long. The shadows behind her thickened, writhing as if waiting for a command. "Help me," she repeated, stepping closer. The ground began to rumble again, louder this time, vibrations pulsing through Mark's body. The air grew heavy, suffocating. Instinct fought against logic, and Mark felt the urge to flee. He reached for Jake, but the boy was frozen, staring wide-eyed at the apparition. "Jake!" Mark screamed, lunging forward. Suddenly, the girl's form flickered like a faulty light, and as her features sharpened, a wave of despair crashed over him. She wasn't just a girl. She was a trap. The shadows surged toward them, tendrils reaching out, wrapping around Mark's legs. Desperate, he ripped himself free and grabbed Jake's hand. "Run!" They bolted, sprinting back into the darkness. Mark's heart pounded in his ears as he dragged Jake along, the unearthly wails of the girl echoing behind them, becoming one with the whispers. "Dad, what was that?" Jake gasped. Mark didn't answer, there was no question about it. They were being hunted. As they raced onward, the forest closed in, and a chilling thought crept into Mark's mind. Behind every tree, every shadow, something waited, a trap, a creature, or perhaps a fate worse than death. Would they reach the edge of the forest or become another whisper lost to the night? The trees loomed larger, darker, and the ground beneath them shook with a sinister rhythm. Mark could feel it in his bones. They were running toward something terrible. What awaited them in the murky depths of the woods? Would they face the true horror that lay in their past, or was it already too late? Branches tangled in their hair, blocks of blackness surrounded them as Mark and Jake raced through the terrifying depths of the forest, the chilling wails still echoing behind them. Mark's lungs burned, a pang of dread bittering his breath as he strained to keep Jake close. The shadows quivered, ready to swallow them whole. A dreadful thought gnawed at Mark's mind: could they really escape this nightmare? What had that girl wanted? As they moved deeper into the woods, the shrill whispers returned, intertwining with the rustling branches. He felt their prickly touch brushing against him, as if the forest itself was alive, turning against them. "Dad!" Jake yelled, his voice high-pitched with fear. "Where do we go?" Mark desperately scanned the dark terrain. Everything looked the same. All they had was fear and adrenaline. "Follow me," he shouted, dragging Jake toward a narrow path that suddenly revealed itself a glimmer of hope in the consuming shadows. The path twisted and turned. The oppressive darkness closed around them, every step uneasy, each noise magnified in the stillness. Mark felt an unshakable sensation of being watched, that they weren't alone. As they moved, the air thickened, suffocating. A sudden rustle in the bushes made both of them jump. For a moment, Mark's heart seized. The forest swelled with tension, every branch snapping underfoot like a fractured bone. "We need to keep going," he urged, but Jake hesitated, his terrified eyes darting to a hollowed-out tree. "Dad," he pointed. "What's that?" A gust of wind drove a chill through Mark as he followed Jake's gaze. Inside the tree, something glinted, something metallic. "Wait right here," Mark ordered, but he could hear the tremor in his own voice. A heavy spirit dropped over him as he stepped closer, dread accumulating in his gut. He knelt and reached into the hollow. His fingers brushed against something cold, and he pulled out a rusty key. Its surface was mottled, as if it had been twisted by years of neglect. "What is that?" Jake asked, barely able to contain his curiosity. I don't know," Mark stammered. But it could suddenly. A bone-chilling laughter pierced the silence, a chorus of ghoulish voices melding into one. The shadows shifted at the edges of the clearing, threatening to engulf them. "Dad, we need to go," Jake cried, shivering. The urgency in his voice snapped Mark back to reality. "Right." Mark shoved the key into his pocket. They sprinted away, the laughter pulsing behind them like a taunt. But the key weighed heavy against his thigh, a reminder that whatever darkness hunted them was not far behind. As they maneuvered through the trees, the ground quaked again, a low growl echoing from below. Another child's looking for help? A malevolent energy enveloped them, whispers spiraling into shouts, begging for salvation. But who were they really calling for? In an instinctive flash of fear, Mark stopped, scanning for any way out. The oppressive sense of dread was turning to desperation. The whispers transformed into cackles, now merging with the wail of the girl. She had friends now, or worse, allies. "Dad!" Jake's voice broke through the mounting terror. "That's the way we came from. No, we can't go back there." Mark felt his mind racing. A panicked decision needed to be made, but each direction felt equally cursed. The laughter crescendoed, and eerie forms spilled from the shadows, mercilessly closing in. "Run!" Mark shouted again as he pulled Jake toward a narrow escape between two towering trees, the laughter morphing into chaos. As they dove through, jagged branches reached for them like skeletal fingers. "This way!" Jake pointed toward a flickering light through the underbrush, the promise of safety or another trap. Mark felt the pulse of fear thrumming louder in his veins. He had a decision to make, but with every second, they were being hunted more relentlessly. What lay ahead? A hollowed refuge or a den of nightmares? Would they find safety or unleash a malevolent presence? The light flickered once more, teasing them as they fought through the thickening brush. Was it the way out, or was it just another trap waiting to ensnare them? Mark's heart pounded like a drum as they neared the flickering light. The shadows behind them were a cascade of chaos, laughter echoing like a dark serenade, tugging at the very fabric of sanity. "Just keep moving," he urged Jake, his breath hitching in his throat. The light became a beacon, illuminating a small clearing. Mark stumbled into the space, panting, pulling Jake along. The world around them was a dark, breathing thing, the laughter receding but the whispers still crawling along their skin. "Look!" Jake pointed. "There's something in the light." Mark squinted, struggling to make out what his son was seeing. The glow surrounded a dilapidated cabin, crooked, as if it had been built in defiance of the laws of nature. Its windows were dark sockets, gaping vacuums drawing them in, while the door hung ajar like an inviting mouth. "We can't go in there," Mark said, clenching his fists. "It has to be a trap. We need to keep." A sudden crash from behind them cut him off, a sound like a tree falling in anger. His instinct screamed to run, but the cabin loomed like an ogre. Maybe it's safe. Jake pleaded, eyes wide with fear and hope. Maybe it can help us. Help? The word tasted bitter on Mark's tongue. What help do you think this place can give? But the cacophony of laughter and whispers was returning. He glanced back. Shadows danced at the edges of the clearing, figures twisting and writhing as they approached. Mark's heart sank. Okay, we have to go inside, he decided, urgency clouding his judgment. He pushed Jake gently but firmly toward the cabin. With one last look at the encroaching darkness, they rushed inside, the air dampened, heavy with the scent of mildew and decay. The wooden floor creaked under their weight, announcing their arrival. The light that seemed so inviting outside fought to cascade through dust-coated windows, revealing scraps of furniture, long abandoned. Was it just a memory of life, or had it held something far worse? Dad, what's that? Jake's small voice broke through the heavy silence. He pointed toward a frame hanging crooked on the wall, a faded photograph of a family. Their faces were devoid of features, smudged like a terrible memory trying to escape. Mark felt a chill ripple through him. It's just an old picture, he said, though he knew deep down that it was more than that. The ghostly figures seemed to watch him, waiting for a chance to leap into his mind. He stepped further into the room, heart hammering in his chest. We might find something useful here, he whispered, more to convince himself than Jake. Then, a door creaked open at the end of the hall. Mark froze. The sound was distinct. It was a whisper that beckoned from behind it, soft, melodic, like a child's lullaby, but darker. Dad? Jake crept closer, intrigued. What is it? Mark held up a hand, waving his son away instinctively. Stay back, I'll check. He took slow, deliberate steps toward the door, the wooden boards groaning in protest beneath him. Each creak echoed in the suffocating silence until it didn't. The whispers faded, replaced by a pulsing silence. He reached for the doorknob, fingers trembling. A sense of dread wrapped around him like a constrictor. Before he could breathe, the door swung open with a wail that pierced through him, revealing a darkened room beyond. In the center stood a small figure, sulking, frame illuminated just enough to see the glimmer of wide, empty eyes staring back at him. Mark stumbled back, realization gripping him cold. They were not alone. Help me, the figure rasped, its voice echoing in the void. He choked out a breath, heart racing. Was this another child? Or something far worse? The very air thickened with anticipation, drowning him in a fear so visceral it stung. Mark was caught, every instinct screaming at him to run. But Jake was still lingering at his side, wide-eyed and fearful. Dad, what do we do? And in that moment, within the suffocating shadows, all the laughter, all the whispers converged into a single thought: once you entered this dark place, there was no turning back. Nothing escapes the forest. Suddenly, laughter erupted anew, swirling around them like a wicked wind. The key in Mark's pocket grew heavy, pulsating as if it had its own heartbeat. Would they face the darkness together, or would this cabin seal their fate forever? And who was the figure waiting in the shadows, longing for salvation? The figure in the shadows took a tentative step forward. The darkness clung to it like a shroud, and Mark's heart raced in response. Who are you? He demanded, his voice shaking though he hated himself for it. The figure did not respond immediately, the silence stretching painfully, an unyielding rope tightening around them. Help me, it repeated, each word like a sickly sweet poison curling in the air. Mark could see now that the figure was a child, a girl, her eyes wide and hollow, like dark wells threatening to swallow all light. Jake tugged at Mark's arm. Dad, I don't like this, let us go. The urgency in his son's voice cut through the haze of fear, igniting a primal instinct to protect, but the girl's gaze held them, a dirt-smudged face framed by matted hair. I don't want to be here. Help me find them, she said, her voice slipping into a whisper that scraped against Mark's nerves. Find who? Mark asked, brow furrowing. It felt like stepping into a trap of riddles where the edges blurred and danger lurked at every turn. Mom and Dad, they're lost, she pleaded, tears pooling in her eyes, reflecting the dim light. You need to help me before they take you too. Chills cascaded down Mark's spine. What do you mean by take? He stammered. The cabin itself seemed to shift around them, the walls contracting, the air thickening as if a living thing was responding to their conversation. They'll come for you like they came for me, she whispered, her voice almost melody-like despite the horror laced within it. Then she turned back toward the darkened room, gesturing toward the depths that swallowed sound and light. You can't stay. They're always close. Jake, we need to go, Mark urged, his throat dry, heart pounding in rhythm with the mounting dread. But his son's gaze was fixated on the girl, curiosity warping his innocent face. Maybe we can help her, Dad. Jake's voice bore a tremor, betraying his own conflict between fear and compassion. Mark's stomach knotted, torn between childlike empathy and the sinister undercurrent that screamed for escape. Please. The girl cried, stepping closer, her outstretched hand trembling. I want to go home. And just like that, the cabin gave a deep groan, a low rumble reverberating beneath their feet. Shadows lengthened, curling like smoke around the girl. The laughter outside grew louder, a chaotic symphony mocking their hesitation. Mark instinctively stepped back, reaching for Jake, who hadn't budged, eyes glued to the girl in a mix of awe and fear. Suddenly, the girl's eyebrows knitted together in concentration. They're here. She shouted, her voice shifting. It now carried an echo, a haunting resonance that vibrated within the walls. Mark felt the air pulse, heavy and electric. Jake, come on. He yelled, not caring if he sounded panicked. It was survival now. With that, they turned to flee, bolting toward the exit, the weight of the cabin closing in around them. But the girl's voice trailed them, a sorrowful murmur that slithered into their ears. You can't leave me. As they burst through the door, daylight assaulted them, blinding in its intensity. But the laughter and whispers continued, swirling around the cabin, a malevolent wind that howled their names in tandem. Feet pounding on the ground, they raced toward the forest's edge, but the whispers called out, threading through the trees. You cannot escape. Mark grabbed Jake's hand tightly, pulling him away from the darkness. We have to keep going. Don't look back. But as they dashed forward, the feeling of being chased rose, an unseen horror approaching from behind, and then, they heard it, an echo of laughter, intertwined with the sweet cries of children playing. Each note struck a nerve, resonating with the primal fears that gnawed at their thoughts. What is that? Jake's voice trembled, panic threading through him. Ignoring his son, Mark pushed harder, desperation fueling his flight. But in his heart, a cold certainty settled. They hadn't left the darkness behind. Burning curiosity clashed with dread as they neared the forest's edge. Just what would they find out there, beyond the trees? Would the shadows finally claim them as their own? And in the depths of that unfinished silence, a new sound crept in, soft as a memory yet sharp as a scream. Come back, you didn't help her. The forest loomed like a living creature, dark and twisted, branches clawing at the sky, beckoning Mark and Jake to its depths. Mark could feel his pulse hammering in his ears, drowning out the sickening laughter echoing behind them. Keep running, he barked, pulling Jake along, feet pounding against the soft earth, urgency morphing into raw panic, but the air shifted, thickening with every step. It felt as if the shadows were reaching, fingers of darkness closing in. Dad, I can hear them. Jake cried, his voice cracking with fear. Mark glanced behind, heart plummeting at the sight of a shape emerging from the shadows, a faint silhouette swaying like a mirage. Stay close. Mark shouted, gripping Jake's hand tighter, feeling the small, trembling fingers slipping slightly. As they pushed deeper into the woods, the trees pressed in, their gnarled roots forming a treacherous path. Where are we going? Jake whimpered, glancing over his shoulder. The laughter now sounded jubilant, almost mocking, resonating through the trees. Mark shook his head, refusing to answer. They had to keep moving, had to escape. With each passing moment, the whispers twisted around them like a noose. It felt as though the forest itself was alive, an entity craving their despair. The trees seemed to bend, angling closer, as if intent on eavesdropping. "Jake!" Mark yelled, desperate a father's instinct. He skidded to a stop as he spotted something shimmering ahead, broken sunlight catching on a thin ribbon. He dared a closer look. A path? Or more darkness waiting for them? He hesitated. "What is it?" Jake whispered, eyes wide, scanning the woods, his breath coming out quick and shallow. Mark couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on them. "Stay next to me," he ordered, fear creeping up, tightening his throat. With a quick step forward, they moved further down the path, now nearly covered by overgrown ferns. The laughter grew louder, now a cacophony of mocking childlike glee. Suddenly, Mark stumbled, gripping Jake, who now stood transfixed. What lay ahead was a clearing, large enough to feel exposed. But in the middle, a small pile of old toys rested. They were covered with grime and leaves, but the brightness of their colors spoke of innocence lost. Mark's heart raced. We need to go," he urged, but Jake took a step closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. "Dad, look!" His voice trembled as he pointed at a doll, a porcelain face, cracked but somehow eerily cheerful. "What?" Mark hissed, panic spilling over. Then, whispered words floated through the air, wrapping around them like a chilling fog. "Help us!" Every hair on Mark's body stood on end. "Jake, no!" He lunged, grabbing his son just as a torrent of wind surged through the clearing. The trees swayed violently as the laughter transformed into wails of despair, filling the air with haunting notes that clawed at Mark's sanity. "We have to go!" he shouted, their feet flying again, chasing the remnants of their courage, but the path seemed endless. The forest enveloped them the deeper they pushed on. The feeling of being hunted settled heavily in their bones, an unshakable shadow looming just out of sight. Then, a voice unlike any they had heard before echoed in the silence, a heavy, melancholic drone that resonated from all directions, wrapping around them like chains. "You cannot run, you will not escape." Mark stumbled, chest heaving, Jake close behind. "Dad!" Jake's voice broke through a haze of terror. What if we go back?" "No!" Mark cried, fear slicing through him. But a cold realization gripped him. What if the girl wasn't just a ghost? What if she was a warning? In the gloom, shadows danced, and he caught glimpses of figures moving at the edge of his vision. Figures that twisted and turned, merging with the trees. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw more children, faces pale, eyes pleading, straining to reach out from the darkness. Chaos erupted around them as Mark fought to keep Jake close. "Keep moving." But as he spoke the words, he noticed a flicker, a shape darting away. The girl. She was back, standing at the edge of the trees, her hollow eyes pleading once more. Mark's heart raced as he turned back to Jake. "We're not going back," he shouted, but the weight of despair settled in, and then, behind them, the forest echoed a soft laugh, a sound filled with malice but also with longing. Help us find them." As they plunged further into the trees, Mark felt the ground tremble beneath them. Something enormous stirred. Would the darkness consume them before they reached safety? Or would they find themselves lost, like the girl, in a place where echoes became reality? The laughter exploded, drowning everything out. And with every step, it twisted into something far more horrifying than they could ever have imagined. The shadows closed in around them, seeping into the very fabric of the woods. Mark yanked Jake forward, nearly stumbling as fear whipped through him like a gust of icy wind. "Run!" he implored, but every step felt heavier, laden with the weight of presences lurking just beyond sight. "Where do we go?" Jake's voice trembled, echoing like a distant whisper against the suffocating silence that quickly enveloped them. The path they followed twisted and turned, a serpentine trail that seemed to defy logic, spiraling deeper into the heart of darkness. Each bend in the road only intensified the forbidding atmosphere, turning anticipation into dread. The laughter returned, a shrill, ghostly sound that reverberated through the air. It danced around them like a swarm of frenzied bees, taunting and teasing. Mark felt a shiver crawl down his spine. "Jake, don't look back." But the boy hesitated, confusion clouding his wide, terrified eyes. But what was that? Mark's grip tightened. "It doesn't matter. Keep moving." They tore through the underbrush, branches snagging at their clothes, the forest conspiring to ensnare them, clawing and scratching with each hurried step. The deeper they went, the more surreal the surroundings became. The trees morphed into faces, grotesque and distorted, mouths twisted in painful screams, eyes glaring as if they had witnessed horrors untold. Each heartbeat thundered in Mark's ears, a relentless reminder of time slipping away. As they navigated the perilous path, he began to feel the oppressive weight of the unholy presence lurking behind them, a shadow, no longer a figment of his imagination, but a predator stalking its prey. Suddenly, a rustle broke through the din, a branch snapping sharply nearby. Mark froze, breath hitching sharply in his throat. The laughter fell quiet, and an unnerving stillness settled over the forest. He could sense something shifting behind them. The air crackled with anticipation. Was it the girl? Had she returned to show them the truth of their fate? "Dad, it's here," Jake whispered, voice quivering, disbelief and terror mingling. Mark dared a glance back, heart pounding in his chest, eyes straining against the shadows. Nothing. Just darkness impenetrable and thick with despair. He shook his head. "We keep moving. We don't stop." They pressed onward, but the forest was relentless, mocking them with its deceiving beauty. Glimmers of light flickered through the trees, drawing them closer yet promising only ruin. In the clearing ahead, a soft glow pulsed like a heartbeat, a flicker of hope twisted into a lure. "Do you see that?" Mark's voice cracked as he pointed, breathless. The bright figures of children danced at the edge of the clearing, illuminated by the light. They called to Jake in sweet, sing-song voices, "Come play with us." "No!" Mark cried, a chill washing over him. Desperation ran through his veins like ice. He yanked Jake backward just as he felt the first tendril of something sinister reach out. But it was too late. Whispers roared through the edge of the clearing, drowning out the laughter with agonized cries. "Join us. Forever help us find them." The echoes twisted and coiled around their hearts, the shadows nearly tangible. Mark could feel Jake pulling away, entranced by the lights, the innocent laughter clouding his judgment. He yanked hard, a surge of adrenaline erupting as he spun Jake around. "We need to leave. Now." The laughter crescendoed, piercing through the fog of their fear, mixing with unfurling shadows that slithered toward them. And as they turned to run, the ground trembled again. This time it wasn't just a ripple, it was a violent shudder, an angry heartbeat of the woods beneath them. They surged forward, but the darkness was closing in fast. Mark's breath came in ragged bursts. He could feel their energy draining, shadows creeping in, whispering their plans. Were they already caught, entangled in this cursed land? Just then, a flash of clarity pierced through the panic. The cabin. Mark realized aloud. If they could reach the cabin, maybe, just maybe, they could find safety. He pushed himself faster, steering them toward the faint memory of where he thought it might be, but as they careened forward, it became clear the forest wasn't finished yet. The darkness that surrounded them began to rearrange, revealing elongated figures watching, waiting, their eyes filled with hunger. "Help us find them," the voices pleaded again, echoing like an ominous chorus in their minds. Mark felt the suffocating pressure of despair closing in. The cabin was their only hope, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what the forest wanted. Would they make it? Or were they fated to join the lost souls that roamed these woods for eternity? Just as he glanced back, the soft laughter began anew, mingling with whispers that echoed through the trees. "You will not escape." Mark picked up the pace again, dread clawing at his insides. The beat of the woods had risen into a thunderous roar, a symphony of death beckoning them further into the unknown. And there, just ahead, the outline of the cabin emerged, menacing under the twisted branches. What awaited them inside? The cabin loomed, shadows wrapping around it like a shroud. Mark's heart raced as he pushed Jake forward. Each step felt like they were wading through molasses, the air thick with a stench of decay. The door stood slightly ajar, creaking as if inviting them into the abyss of the unknown. "Stay close," Mark barked, tugging Jake along. The moment they crossed the threshold, darkness enveloped them. The sun's feeble light faded, casting eerie shapes that danced on the cabin's walls. He could feel the weight of the forest pressing down, wanting entry. Inside, dust motes floated through what remained of the sunlight, but the air was stale, a warning hanging heavy. Mark peered into the shadows, trying to discern if anything lurked within, but all he heard was the rapid beating of his heart, synchronized with the rustle of the forest. "Dad, what if they follow us here?" Jake's voice trembled, fear coiling tightly around his throat. Mark swallowed hard, scanning for any signs of life. "They can't. They have to stay outside." He attempted to sound confident, but even he doubted it. What if this cabin was a trap? A breeding ground for whatever soul-consuming forces haunted these woods. A chill swept through, and suddenly the cabin felt alive, the walls whispering secrets Mark couldn't decipher. "Help us," echoed faintly, a chilling reminder of what they had just fled. "Listen, we need to barricade the door." Mark rushed to the old, rotting furniture, dragging a heavy table in front of the entrance. For every creak of the wood, he felt the shadows inch closer, thickening, longing to embrace them again. Jake's fear transformed into curiosity. "What if there's a way out?" he asked, his eyes darting toward a battered window. "What if we can climb through?" "No," Mark snapped, desperation spilling forth. "We can't go out there. I don't care what happens, we stay in here." The boy recoiled, hurt flashing across his face. It was only him and Jake against the world outside. Mark took a breath, forcing himself to soften. "I'm sorry, Jake. I don't want to lose you. We'll find a way out. Together." Outside, eerie laughter echoed, swirling like fog through the cracks. It sounded like children know, spirits luring them with promises of safety. Mark pressed his back against the door, heart racing as the howls grew louder, mixing with the whispers. Shadows began to slide through the edges of the windows, warping and flickering like flames. "Jake!" Mark shouted, "Stay away from the windows." The boy nodded, eyes wide, but they were drawn to the flickering shapes outside, entranced by the facade of innocence that beckoned them. "Dad, I hear them." Mark could feel the energy shift in the room. The air thickened, stifling against his skin, wrapping them in a suffocating embrace. He darted across the room, yanking Jake back as he began to inch toward the window. "We need to stay focused," Mark shouted, panic rising in his throat. He turned back to the room. Dust-covered walls echoed their isolation, a hollow reminder that they were on their own. A sudden crash sounded from behind, a splintering noise that made Mark flinch. The boards creaked ominously under their weight. They weren't alone in the cabin. Mark felt a presence sway behind him. His breath caught in his chest as he turned slowly, dread twisting in his stomach. There, in the dim light, a figure began to materialize, barely a distortion against the wall, eyes glinting maliciously. "Find them, join us," it hissed, a voice that dripped with malice, calling to some dark instinct inside him. "Jake, run! Grab that axe!" Mark yelled, his voice a raw edge of desperation. Terrified, he could feel time slipping, the walls beginning to pulse like a living thing. Every heartbeat filled with horror. This was no mere hunt, they had entered a realm beyond the comprehension of living souls. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging them into darkness. And with it came the cold breath of fear. Mark reached for the axe, adrenaline surging. "We have to fight." But as he grasped the handle, a haunting laughter erupted in their ears, reverberating through the very core of the cabin. "Help us find them," echoed again as shadows leapt toward the corner of the room. The energy around them crackled ominously, overwhelming Mark with dread. This wasn't just survival, it was a battle against something ancient and unyielding. And all at once, the door trembled again, shaking with violent fury, as if something out there yearned for their very souls. Mark faced Jake, the axe heavy in his grip, his eyes clouded with determination and fear. "We can't stay here. What's out there is stronger than us." But in that moment, the cabin seemed to pulsate in answer, pulsing with dread and promises too sinister to comprehend. Could they escape this nightmare? Or was it all a part of the plan? As the door rattled violently, Mark braced himself, knowing they were about to uncover the true terror hidden within the cabin. And then, silence fell, deep and foreboding, just before the darkness surged forward. Mark grasped the axe tightly, muscles taut, heart hammering in rhythm with the dull thud echoing from beyond the cabin walls. It felt as though the dark was alive, pressing close, hungry for him and Jake. Shadows danced in the corners, mocking him, whispering promises of dread. A deafening silence engulfed them, stretching painfully, making every breath feel like a weight. "Jake, listen to me." Mark crouched down to look into his son's eyes. Fear mirrored there, made his heart ache. "Whatever happens next, we stick together. We fight together. You hear me?" Jake nodded, eyes reflecting a fragile sense of bravery. "I'm scared, Dad," he whispered, clenching his fists as if that could keep the fear at bay. "I know. But you're not alone." Mark forced a smile but felt its tremor. The night had twisted everything familiar into a nightmare, but he refused to let Jake feel lost. They were just a father and son, fighting against something vast and ancient, yet they had each other. Suddenly, the door burst open, a torrent of darkness spilling in like smoke. Mark swung the axe instinctively. The blade sliced through shadow, a high-pitched shriek filled the air. For one eternal moment, everything stopped. The echo of that tortured sound hung in the air like a ghost. Then, with the sound of crackling energy, figures began to flood in, grotesque children with void-like eyes, their voices merging into a chorus of sinister pleas. "Help us find them." Mark pushed Jake behind him. "No, you can't take him," he shouted, adrenaline surging. They clawed at the walls, twisting the air around them, a cyclone of despair and anguish. But the boy's presence made the cabin pulse louder, stronger. "Help us," they echoed again, each word unraveling Mark's resolve. Memories of laughter stolen and innocence lost mingled in the air, threatening to snare him in their web of sorrow. Mark could almost taste the desperation. The years of torment. The cabin was more than a shelter, it was an anchor for the forsaken. "Jake! Stay with me!" Mark shouted, trying to drown out the endless whispers. He raised the axe, ready to defend his boy. The deafening cacophony rose, piercing into his skull, a siren's song tainted with malice. That he gripped the axe so tightly his knuckles turned white, feeling it as a part of him, a lifeline against the dark. "Come back," they chanted, as shadows clawed for his jacket, trying to pull him into their lament, a power play between a desperate father and unimaginable forces. "Find them!" Mark screamed back, the surge of anger spurring him forward. His primal need to protect ignited flames of determination. He wrapped his arm around Jake, pulling him tight. "We will not be your prey." With an earth-shattering roar, he swung the axe again, and the shimmering shadows shrank back, screeching in protest. It was a battle for freedom, a clash of wills that echoed through the cabin walls. Mark felt the warmth radiate from the axe, its power growing, thrumming with every swing they defended against the darkness. Suddenly, an explosion of white light erupted from within, illuminating every inch of the cabin, bringing clarity to the struggle. For a fleeting moment, Mark glimpsed the figures hoarding treasured memories, joyous moments lost to darkness. They were trapped. "Jake! We have to find a way to help them." Mark shouted, realizing that this cabin held more than just shadows. This was their chance. But how? Jake looked bewildered, but deep down, his father's resolve glinted, sparking hope. "Remember that key?" Mark rasped, recalling the rusty old thing found in the hollow tree. What if it could unlock the truth hidden deep within the corner? They can't linger if we open the door to their freedom. Mark dashed to where he had tucked the key away, feeling the weight in his pocket. It pulsed like a heart. "Stay close, Jake," he urged as he leaped toward the dimmest corner of the cabin. "Help us." The mournful chant surrounded him, but it was no longer filled with dread. It almost held a different note, a yearning for release. No more shadows. Desperate fingers pulled the key from his pocket and fumbled with the lock hidden behind a tattered tapestry. It slid inside and turned with a loud click, as if time had halted. Mark pushed against the door, praying for salvation. The howls intensified, but the horrid laughter was now a discordant harmony, twisting together into something else, something powerful. Light streamed forth into the cabin, illuminating everything: the walls, the ghosts they had chased. And that's when he saw her, the girl, the one lost. "Find them, find our way home," she whispered, the pain in her eyes mingling with hope. "Okay. Let us go." Mark shouted and tugged Jake forward. The door flung open with a force so strong it sent the dark figures shrieking back. For a heartbeat, the shadows twisted only to evaporate before the blinding light. Mark held Jake's hand tighter, and together, they dashed through the threshold where a beam of brilliance awaited them. Just outside the cabin, the woods fell silent, the malevolent whispers dissolving into nothingness. They stood bathed in light, fear peeling away like the husk from a nut. "Dad, are we free?" Jake's voice trembled, adorned with confusion and wonder. Mark looked around. The forest was breathing, but now it exhaled a different air, a weight lifted. "I think so, buddy. I think we did it." But the work wasn't over. They turned back toward the cabin, where the flickering shadows still lingered, but as they shared a determined glance, Mark felt the warmth of courage. In that moment, Mark resolved, as long as he had Jake by his side, they would bring all the lost souls back home. "Let us help them," he murmured. Together, with their joined hands, they stepped forward, ready to face the shadows, the laughter, and the tales to be told. And as light spilled into the heart of darkness, they heard whispered words of gratitude ripple through the trees. Thank you. The past had not claimed them. It had transformed them. Mark and Jake walked into reconciliation, where ghosts could find peace, and they had found their way back to love under the shelter of the very woods that had tried to steal it away. Together. A family. A new beginning. Don't miss moments like this. You need to subscribe now to catch our exclusive stories every week. Smash that like button now so the algorithm can feed this content to more fans just like you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what just went down. You never know what might come next, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let us keep spreading the love and uncovering the mysteries we encounter on this wild ride.